This is Scott Becker with the Becker Business and the Becker Private Equity Podcast. Thrilled today to be joined by one of the brightest people that I get a chance to visit with and work with, David Pivnick. We're going to talk to David today about excellence every day is the topic. So here's the deal with David Pivnick. David was valedictorian of his law school class, brilliant, achievement-oriented person who is one of these people who has excelled in the practice of law, in leadership, in people development, business development, and a lot more. And we're going to talk to him today about how does one show up with that kind of motivation and excellence day in and day out? And are there any habits or ideas or thoughts that he could share with us that might help some of us in sort of showing up that way every day, how we'd like to? David, take a second and just introduce yourself for a moment. Then I want to dig into sort of this ability to stay motivated and focused day in and day out and bring the A game all the time. And how does one do that? What advice do you have around that? David, can you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, Scott. Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure to get to catch up with you. So as you mentioned, name is David Pivnick. I'm a partner at McGuireWoods, a litigator, practices focused primarily on healthcare and private equity litigation, and most heavily on government investigations and defending, allegations under the False Claims Act or government fraud allegations. I live in the suburbs of Chicago and am married to someone who tolerates me wonderfully, which is great and the best I could ask for, and 3 great kids, and really love sports. So that's me in a nutshell. In terms of your question, and I appreciate the lead in and the kind words. I think the biggest key is 2 things. One is you have to work hard and have the work ethic and show up and actually do your best, try your best every day. And I think that is largely the easy side of it. Everybody has the ability to work hard and do their best. I think the second part of it, which is tougher, but it's something I think I do fairly well and have done pretty well for a long time, is managing to compartmentalize different things in my life so that when one thing is going well, it's not going to impact other things. When one thing's going badly, which is probably the more important side of the equation, it's not going to drag things down. So if I'm having a bad day at home, if someone's sick in my family or something bad happens to a friend or a loved one, I'm able to deal with it and compartmentalize that, but still show up and focus on work. And similarly, if I have a bad day at work, which try and keep those few and far between in any context, but am able to really keep that within the bucket it is, figure out how to move forward on that front and not let it impact other clients or personal relationships. So I think the ability to keep perspective is probably the best way to put it simply, in terms of what's important in life, what's important in any discrete aspect of life, and then focusing on the bigger picture to drive forward despite a disappointment or a setback or a challenge in one front. I think that's an important skill and something that allows me to try and have excellence every day and to succeed. And I think it's a key to having that kind of consistency.
And take a moment on that compartmentalization. Roger Federer talks a lot about his ability to do that, and one of the reasons why he was so successful is the ability to compartmentalize. He'd have a loss, he'd have a victory, he'd be able to put it away and come back the next week or the next couple weeks in the same way. He'd be able to spend great time with his family even after a bad loss and not letting it affect his time with his family and so forth. That skill to not have those emotions mesh, to be able to compartmentalize. Can you work on that? Is that something that comes naturally to you? How do you think about that a little bit?
So, first of all, I think it's critical, and I think Roger Federer's summary there makes great sense, and it's not surprising that a prolific champion and winner like Federer would come up with that. I think it's something that is partially innate and partially something that can be worked on. I think, for folks who can do that sort of easily and where it comes to them with ease to be able to focus on different facets at different times and not get stressed out about everything else, I think that's a gift and they're fortunate to have it. For those who struggle a bit with that, or where things sort of spiral in their minds and each issue becomes a bigger issue. I think it's important to do a couple things. One, big picture, both, at the start of every year, at the start of every month, at the start of every week, at the start of every day, break down what are we trying to accomplish? What are you trying to accomplish in that given time period? What are the goals? What are the priorities? How do those priorities rank and align? And then as things come up, trying to look back at the targets for the day, the week, the month, the year is important, because most setbacks, not all setbacks, but most setbacks, fortunately, are contained, are pretty discreet, and you can move past them. They're going to be a disappointment or frustration. And so I think, taking the time to actually script out what you're trying to accomplish in a given time period and getting into some micro time periods, I don't think it needs to be a crazy detailed list. But I mean, every day when I'm heading to the office, I jot down, in my notes, what I want to get off my desk that day. And that doesn't always work, because things come up during the day, and sometimes I get very few of those tasks that I have to push to the next day. But having a sense of what I'm working towards on that, but same thing with family, although I'm less formal about it in that context. But I think having a game plan and consistently thinking about what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish in any given time period is a great level set, that when other issues come up, it's easier to put them in the context of that broader plan. And then the other piece of that is keeping in mind what's truly important. And for most people, family, friends, etc., are going to be their top priority, which is not to suggest that work and clients and customers aren't critically important, colleagues, etc. Those are all very important parts of people's lives as well. But understanding where the priorities are and then keeping issues in mind in the context of those other priorities, I think, can be very helpful as you're trying to get used to sort of moving past or contextualizing setbacks so they don't spiral.
How often, I know that when I'm really on, I'm going back to those goals and that task list really often, and I'm very disciplined about putting it together constantly. How, and it's almost an indication of how wired in I am, how well I'm following those goals and that task list and trying to accomplish what I set out to accomplish. How important is that to sort of your ability to stay centered and stay focused and bring excellence to what you do? That sort of clarity of here's what we're trying to do today, this month, this week.
Yeah, I think it probably varies for different people. For me personally, I think it's critically important. I think having those recurrent level sets, thinking about where I'm at and where I'm trying to go, and revisiting those dynamics so that I'm hitting my marks, to me is very important. Generally speaking, fortunately, I've been lucky to have a fair amount of success. So usually when I'm unpacking that, it's favorable, but it's just as important, frankly, when there is a setback or things aren't going well, because then I need to sit back and figure out how I move forward, what that looks like, whether I need to do things differently, whether I need to be doubling down on the efforts that I'm already engaged in, or whether there's somewhere in between, a slight tweak or slight nuance. So I think, to me, it's not necessarily it needs to be done every month or every week or any other set cadence. It's an as appropriate, but certainly for me personally, the review process and thinking about those goals or any setbacks and what the context looks like, how to move forward, I certainly find personally to be tremendously important in keeping me on track on a broader front.
No, and I love that. And what about keeping your energy level where you need it to be? How important is it? So I know you do some work on I think the stationary bike. I know you do some, movement, sleep. What allows you to keep the energy level where you want it to be so you can bring your A game? Any thoughts on that? Because I think that's so important to so many of us is how do you keep that energy level where it's got to be?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you emphasizing stationary bikes, and you were gracious enough not to point out that I can't ride a regular bike, but I do that more than anything else, frankly, just to stay healthy and to have a little bit of balance, particularly because for better or worse, I don't eat all that well. So making sure I'm working out is sort of the least I could do to take care of myself. Um, I don't have a sort of direct recipe on the rest of it. I work out primarily, again, for health reasons more than physical health more than mental health reasons. I don't sleep as much as I should, but I have a pretty consistently high energy level. I don't, really drink caffeine other than periodic Diet Cokes at dinner, which is not for caffeine. So I don't have a ton to add there, mainly because I'm fortunate that I tend to have good energy levels and good enough balance. I mean, for me, more than anything else, and I've talked about this on prior podcasts, I sort of live and structure my life that I'm working towards goals. And for me these days, that is most frequently figuring out, vacation plans or other events with my wife and kids that I look forward to. And that's kind of what keeps my energy level high. And it sounds a little bit trite, and I recognize that, but it really is a function of having things that I'm looking forward to, goals, usually, actual targets like an upcoming vacation or things like that, that I'm looking forward to and I'm working towards. And then I motivate myself off of that so that it's a little bit of a mindset of, I know I'm going to go to, Hawaii at spring break. And so I need to work hard to make sure that, I can pay for the trip that I want to pay for and take the time and enjoy it. So more than anything else, that's what sort of gets me up in the morning and keeps me going, is thinking about things that are ahead. And, one of my best friends pretty consistently makes fun of me that I'm always planning some kind of travel. And as soon as I finish a trip, I'm thinking about the next one. And there's definitely some truth to his jokes, but a lot of that is strategic because I work incredibly hard between that and, frankly, usually work while on vacation as well. And so what keeps me motivated day to day is less about sleep or working out or anything else, and more about thinking about what I want to accomplish next and driving myself to work hard in the interim so I feel like I've earned that thing that comes next.
Yes, but I think that's fantastic as a way of sort of like looking out to the future, something to look forward to that allows you to sort of compartmentalize, as you talked about earlier. It's to really focus in the present because you know you've got something coming up that you're excited about with family, with kids, with everybody else, so that you could stay focused in the present. I think it's a great skill. I've seen you do it about as well as I've seen anybody do it in my career. So I admire it. I think it's fantastic. I love the adage you talk about with being valedictorian. You talked less about being brilliant, but I think that's a little bit of humility, but just about really showing up every day with the right energy level, the right preparation level for every single exam, every single test, every single paper. And that's a hard thing to do for many of us. I really applaud it. Again, we're visiting today with David Pivnick. The concept today is excellence every day, which David is an expert in. So, David, I want to thank you for joining us today on the Becker Business and the Becker Private Equity Podcast. Always fantastic to visit with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. Scott, appreciate it.